Surveys consistently show that people are more afraid of running out of money than dying. But none of us knows how long we'll live. This makes financial planning a challenge. Today we'll talk about how to best project life expectancy and incorporate that into your financial planning. Austin, when I sit down with clients, I joke with them that they can make the financial planning process a lot easier if they'll just tell us when they're going to die. And a few years ago, we had a new client come in and sit down with us. And when I said that, he immediately said, well, I'm living to 88. And he points to his wife and says, she's living to 92. So barring that level of clarity, we all have this question of how do we put together a financial plan, especially with the uncertainties that we have ahead of us. And we're excited to be able to dive in today because there's actually a lot of statistical backing to kind of the framework that we'll use and the ways that we grapple with putting together a financial plan in the context of all of that data.
Right. Well, and the reality is most people really struggle with that fear of, will I run out of money? If I retire now, am I going to die penniless and on Social Security and I have to sell my home and move in with my kids? Like, it is a constant fear, even with clients that are affluent and have lots of money saved. So this isn't just something that affects lower income, it affects high income because we're living longer today than we have in the past. We have generally better health into old age. And what that means is you need to plan for that longevity. So walk us through some of these strategies for how to think about longevity, how to think about financial planning with longevity in mind.
Well, I think oftentimes clients will come in and they'll have anchored in their minds something that they heard in a conversation with a friend or they've seen in the media, and it will be based on a general population number. It will not be rooted in actually where their cohort is in life. So for instance, if we have someone who is 65 and they think, okay, well, I heard one time that my generation, we're supposed to live to 78 or 77, something like that, then in the back of their mind, they may have an anchoring bias that says, well, I have a life expectancy of 12, 13, 14 years, and maybe they say my health is decent, and so I'll live a couple years longer, but they might say, okay, I've got 15 years left. Well, actually, if we start to stack up all of the things that they have going for them, they may have twice as long or even longer there. And that's where, when we start to add these different factors of where their health is right now, the fact that they've already lived 65 years, the fact that they have better education, they have more affluence, they have better access to healthcare, all of these different pieces stack up to sometimes a much, much higher level of expected lifetime than the average population, whatever that number is.
Right. Well, and to your point, even actuaries, they have multiple different tables that they use based on life expectancy. So if you hear one that says maybe in 1950, if you were born in 1950, your period life expectancy, that just means you and yourself, presuming that no other changes are made, no improvements to longevity, healthcare, all those things, you had a life expectancy of 65.6 years for if you're a male, 71 years if you're a female. Now, if you take that same period that you were born in 1950, but presume that things have gotten better over time, well, now life expectancy is 73 years for males and almost 80 years for females. So really, you even have to take all statistics with a grain of salt and know, okay, where are they coming from with that statistic? What are the things that they're answering? And that really helps pull those layers back. But again, coming back to your point, that doesn't incorporate what's your level of education? What is your level of affluence? What is your access to healthcare? Do you live in a city? Do you live in a rural area? There's so many pieces here. Have you smoked your whole life?
Right.
Like, there's so many other things that contribute to longevity.
Well, and just as a quick example, I looked at a number of different tables with varying levels of data being incorporated. So for me, in again, mid-40s, what Social Security would say, based on where I'm at right now, their tables, they would say that my estimated life expectancy is 36 and a half years. So I'm supposed to live to about 82. Now, if you look and you go one layer deeper and you say, okay, well, I don't smoke and I am married and I have a general health level that is good, then another calculator that's very good, a longevity illustrator, will put each one of these in the show notes so that you can be able to, type in your data if you so choose. But that one says that I'm going to live on average to age 90, and that my wife lived a couple years longer, and that the average expectancy for at least one of us would be 96. So again, we see that go. Now, blueprint income, which allows you to put in even more data, including height and weight and education level, marital status, whether you've been retired yet or not, income level, exercise amount, general health, diabetes, whether you have that, how much you drink, and if you smoke. So a lot more robust. They say that my life expectancy is 98. So much higher there than that 90 with that population, because for those of you who do not know, I'm a part of a cult, which is CrossFit. And so with that, there's just a lot more exercise. There's all these different pieces that I kind of stack up, and that kind of adds up over time. Now, the final one that we'll link in there, which is a website called Living to 100, and this actually has not only all of those things that I just said, but it has a whole battery of other elements as well. It says that its best estimate is that I'll live to 96. Yeah. So maybe there's some other qualifying things in there that maybe reduce that life expectancy for me just a little bit. But nonetheless, we go all of these different layerings, and I think that's one of the things that our clients don't appreciate as much, is that all of these incremental pieces are typically stacking up in their favor. Right. Because our clients, again, have typically a higher level of affluence, higher access to healthcare. They have a higher level of education. All these different pieces that add to that life expectancy.
Right. Well, and if you look back at the three different examples for you, Social Security said you were going to live to 82.
Right.
The others were 90, 96, 98.
Right.
There's a vast spread there. So if you're only looking at Social Security, which is, they have great actuaries, but the reality is it asks for your name and date of birth, or not your name, but your date of birth and your gender.
Right.
That's all they ask.
That's it.
And so I think when we look at longevity in a very narrow context and say, well, my cohort only lives to 82, therefore I'm going to live to 82.
Right.
Then if we plan as if we will only live to 82, how does that affect a financial plan?
Well, and it's significant. And one of the things that we always get questions on as we sit down is, well, when should I take Social Security? And sometimes it's also, when should I take my pension, if there is some optionality there? Or should I take a level income option even earlier than when my pension would typically start, if we have someone who's retiring, say, at 59, and they want to get an additional level of income prior to age 62 or something like that. So we've got all kinds of different decisions based on this, but some of it too is a portfolio decision. Yeah. Because if we've only got 15 years, for instance, we've got someone who's at full retirement age in 66, 67, that time frame, and they're saying, well, I'm only going to live to 15 years. Well, that's a fairly short investment horizon. But if instead we say 25 years, that's a longer investment horizon, maybe more time for kind of the ups and downs, and also a greater need for growth of a portfolio to be able to offset inflation and help overall. So I thought one of the things that would be helpful here is if we have, again, not me as the focus point here and kind of, a guy in his mid-40s, but what if we have someone who is in their mid-60s, and kind of average height, average weight for the population, and average kind of overall, if we said, a white male, age 65, 5'10", 190 pounds, saying average health, 2 to 7 drinks on a week-to-week basis, college educated, historically has made at least $80,000 a year. If we're sitting down with that person, typically he is going to say, well, I'll be lucky if I get to my mid-80s. Yep. He'll say 20 years. And so that the crossover point with Social Security, for instance, is that if you claim at full retirement age, and let's say your full retirement age, just to make this simple, is 67 versus deferring to age 70, then that crossover point is, if you live Beyond age 81, 82, oftentimes you're going to have a better outcome if you defer to 70. If you pass away prior to then you should have taken earlier. So if they say 85, they're kind of right on the cusp there of saying, well, maybe it's good to defer. Oftentimes, if that person is married and has a spouse, one of them will think, well, there's a better chance that we'll live into our late 80s. And so that would kind of tip the odds towards deferring. But what we find here is that if you're just that average person, again, 65, with what I described there, the life expectancy that blueprint income, I should say, calculator would come up with is 92. That's a vast difference.
6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we look at that and we say, that's quite a difference when we think about claiming for Social Security, for instance, because if 81 is the crossover point, well, now we've got 11 extra years just for, the man. And if he's married, then we've got another spouse that may be able to take advantage of that income as well, if he should predecease. So we've got all kinds of different issues there. So I thought, kind of going down through here, kind of our average client that would have a college degree, maybe versus a average client who would have a high school degree, the extra life expectancy would be 1.1 years. College grad versus high school grad. Marital status, those who are married versus divorced, 2.2 years. If you take the average person, again, in there, would be 2.2 years that we just described. The exercise amount, if you exercise rarely versus exercising 3 or 4 times a week, would be another 2.2 years. General health, this is a really interesting one because it's self-selected.
Right.
And they say, well, you just think about your general health versus, everybody else in your cohort. How would you describe it? There's no other markers given, but it's just, kind of your level of optimism in some ways. If we look at just good health versus, which would kind of be a 3 on a scale of 1 to 5, versus bad, which is 1, and excellent, which is 5. Good, again, puts us at 92 years. If excellent, though, we add another 4.2 years. If bad, we take off 11 and a half years.
Yeah.
So, that can be a key describer. Oftentimes we'll sit down with clients and they'll say, well, I can't imagine that I'm going to live another 15 years. And we say, okay, well, how are you feeling right now? What's your health like right now? Oh, it's good. But I'm probably not going to. There's a disconnect, there oftentimes. One of the ones that actually is kind of surprising that it doesn't take off more time in terms of life expectancy is diabetes. I can't tell you the number of clients that we've sat down with that have said, well, I have diabetes and so I'm probably not going to live, more than another 5 years. And they might be in their mid-60s.
Right.
And we look at this and say, okay, well, for this guy, just the average population, again, of people that we would serve with what I've described, takes off 4.5 years. So yes, it takes off time.
Right.
But we're going from 92 to 87.
Right.
So that's still even beyond when we would look at say, the trade-off for Social Security there at age 81. If we look at drinking and smoking, not as much of an impact in terms of the number of drinks, just provided, again, that we don't have alcoholism in play there, which would reduce life expectancy. But the smoking side of things, very pronounced. If we have a person who is still smoking and doing that actively, would take off about 11 or 12 years of life expectancy versus someone who has never smoked or hasn't smoked in more than a decade there. So lots of different pieces there. And as well, just we know that folks born in later decades, again, their life expectancy is higher by something, if we think about someone born in 1960 versus 2020, life expectancy increased by about 7 years. So that's another good reason that we need to reframe Social Security such that full retirement age is not constant, but that it's increasing some amount of time. I'm not saying that it needs to increase 7 years for this newest cohort, but a couple of years certainly makes sense at least. So that's a quick run through of that blueprint income calculator, and that's one of the more robust ones, one of the more accessible ones. But what this again brings us back to is if we can get a better idea, we can have a a conversation, again, that looks at the trajectory of that financial plan and brings in data that's going to be useful to us.
Right. And I think the key here is having a conversation with your advisor about this. If you have had history of cancer or other terminal illnesses or things that could really significantly reduce your life expectancy, then it's time to tailor a plan based on that. But we don't want to tailor a plan based on actuarial tables that say, well, your cohort on average lives to 82.
Right.
But if you have a cohort that lives to 82 and you have a history of cancer, okay, then maybe yes, we do need to look towards that life expectancy number. So there's all sorts of these other pieces that are at play that we'd really say longevity is one piece of a financial plan, but we don't want to play it short. We'd rather play conservative and say, you're more likely going to live longer than you think.
And that's true across almost all of our client conversations. The one example that I would say probably that differed, I had a client that sat down with, and from the first moment he said, well, I want you to plan for me to live to 120 with full energy, full lucidity. Anybody other than him, I think, has typically undershot that life expectancy. And particularly also when we think about a couple. If we're working with a couple, oftentimes one spouse or the other will say, well, I'm probably not, I don't have significant longevity, and the other spouse may be fairly neutral on that. But between the two of them together, we still have to factor that in. And that's one of the sites that we really like, that longevity illustrator. It's not as robust as what I was detailing there on an individual basis, but it shows the statistics for a couple together, and it does have a retirement date, do you smoke, and general health level. And so those are the three of the biggest drivers, in terms of how long someone might live. But it's so interesting when we put the statistics for a couple together, because then they can say, okay, well, even if, husband only has life expectancy of 84 and wife has life expectancy of 87, well, there's still a median life expectancy between the two of them of something like 89 or 90. And that really stacks the odds in favor of them planning for a longer time frame. There. So that's a great one if you want to look at it and say, okay, well, we need to look at this multiple people, what that overall life expectancy is. And particularly with folks that might have 3, 4, 5 years of difference in terms of their birth dates, that can be a really helpful one there as well, because it includes those different dynamics where we can say, well, we've got a younger spouse that we can't discount his or her age there.
Well, thanks for walking us through all of the longevity calculators, just that different research. Clients, if you enjoyed this, feel free to reach out to us to have a further conversation about your longevity. Also, leave any comments or questions down below, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. If you like these financial planning videos, please share it with a friend, and if you have questions, go to our website at SiriusRetirement.com. This content was provided by Retirement Planning Services. We are located in Knoxville, Tennessee. You can visit our website at SiriusRetirement.com. The information in this recording is intended for general educational and informational purposes only, and should not be construed as investment advisory, financial planning, legal, tax, or other professional advice based on your specific situation. Please consult with your professional advisor before taking any action based on its contents. Advisory services offered through Retirement Planning Services, LLC.